Welcome to Storytime with HDThul. I am HDThul, and together we'll be reading Chapter 8 from Henderson's Meat Wagon, entitled Old Smoky. And before we get started with that, if you like what I'm reading to you, click like, subscribe to my channel. That way you can get notifications for new videos coming out. And also I have 3 other books available on Amazon under HDThul. Of course, last name spelled T-H-U-L. And without further ado, let's get started. So, Chapter 8, Old Smoky, page 87. All right. Eric Turner was an old man in his late 60s. He had been with Daniel even when he was a pastor up in Boise. Eric goes by Old Smoky usually, as he had earned his name quite well. Eric goes... Okay, never mind. Let me start over. I'm sorry. Eric Turner was an old man in his late 60s. He had been with Daniel even when he was a pastor up in Boise. Eric goes by Old Smoky usually, as he had earned his name quite well. Eric is also a very devoted member of Daniel's church. He is an avid follower. He earned his nickname because he is always smoking weed and getting high. There is a small handful of people that have been with Daniel that long, as they are the most loyal of Daniel's congregation. Daniel does have a blazing hot temper, but he also has a sweet and loving side as well. Some of Daniel's followers, Daniel had taken in when no one else would. Others have had their lives saved in at least some way. There was one that Daniel took a bullet for during World War II. Many of his congregation feel that they owe Daniel a life debt, which is why they are so willing to do anything and everything for him, even murder. Many of his followers are attractive women that he has had sex with on several occasions, who have become devoted to him on a dangerous and obsessive level. Old Smoky was somewhat short, with a head of shoulder-length gray hair. His eyes were always red and bloodshot, and every time he is around, something bizarre always happens. He volunteers his time to help out in whatever way he can. He is the one going around mowing the lawn, or fixing things when something gets broken. Sometimes he helps stock the shelves in Daniel's grocery store, and other times he helps out in the plant, cutting meat with other workers. When he moves, music chimes from his body, like wind chimes, and he always has a shifty smile. He lives in a junkyard just a few miles outside of town, and he makes a decent living from his junkyard, selling parts to local mechanics, as he had parts for just about every vehicle known to man, including motorcycle parts. When he volunteers to help Daniel out in some way, he just shows up. He don't call. Then, when he does show up, he usually goes up to Daniel and asks what he needs today. Usually it's something simple, like there is a conveyor that isn't working properly, or there's a few lights that need to be changed. Sometimes Daniel has a new crew that needs to be trained, which is usually Boris's job, but when Boris can't, then Daniel will ask Old Smoky if he could help teach these new recruits how to keep their knife sharp and how to cut meat. Or somebody called in, and he is asked to cover for somebody. Eric never asks for a penny from him, but he gets paid in other ways. Because Daniel has a contract with Old Smoky, which states that Daniel is to serve Eric Turner for all eternity in his phantom meat plant, but he must wait for the orders, which will be given when the time is right. Today, Old Smoky drove up in his '38 Ford pickup and parked in the employee parking lot. He pulled the e-brake and stepped out of his truck. The parking lot seemed to be full of cars and trucks on this bright and sunny day. He walked into the main entrance of the plant. He walked past all the offices that were along the long hallway. The fluorescent lights above seemed to be flickering on and off and buzzing softly. He walked past the secretaries, who were typing madly and sounding like a barrage of machine gun fire echoing through the hallway. There was a door at the end of the hall, and there was the men's and women's locker rooms on the left and right side of the hall, and there was a medium-sized break room hooked to the left. He passed the locker rooms and the break room, and there was a rack next to the door at the end of the hall with hard hats and earplugs for visitors or any of the other workers that don't work in the plant but need to go in there for some reason, as was an OSHA requirement. Just before the door, next to the extra supply of hard hats and earplugs, was hairnets. There was a sign on the door that read, "It is required for anybody to entering to wear a hairnet, earplugs, and a hard hat." He put on the hairnet over his shaggy gray hair, and music chimed from his fingertips as he inserted his earplugs. If you were to turn to your left, you would see stairs going down into the cold side of the plant, while the door to the right was the hot side, which is where animals get killed, skinned, gutted, and split. Music chimed softly as he opened the door and walked through. Both the hot and the cold side were divided up into sections. One section is for fowl, such as turkeys and chickens. There is another section specifically for pork, and one more section was for beef. If they were butchering lamb or anything else, it would go through the beef side. It was noisy. The machinery was loud as he entered through the beef side of the kill floor, which is the other word for the hot side, in which it wasn't really hot. It just wasn't refrigerated like the cold side is. Beef carcasses were hanging upside down with their ankles hooked together and trolling down the rail that the trolleys were hanging on. If you turned to your left, you would see the beginning stage of the processing plant, in which you would see cows that were hanging and coming out of another room or section of the plant. Their eyes were shut and their tongues were sticking out. Blood and shit on their fur and a hole in the middle of their forehead where they got shot with a bolt gun. If you look to your right, there is someone with a chain around his or her waist, with a metal scabbard full of knives on one side of his waist, and a ceramic steel and a smooth steel and a rough steel on the other, with a chain mesh glove on the non-knife hand and a Kevlar glove with a plastic glove over the Kevlar glove on the knife hand, and standing underneath as the cows would hang overhead. He or she would use a knife to cut a gash into the cow's throat, and blood would gush out onto the floor, pooling the blood on the floor as he had to walk through knee-deep blood until he went further down, where you would see someone wearing the same attire as the rest, with chain mesh gloves, a chain wrapped around the waist, knives, scabbards, steels, etc., and standing on a platform high above, cutting along the ankle and down the calf and start to take the hide off as it would begin to peel off like a banana, revealing the meat underneath. Next to that person was another on a platform, slightly lower, cutting further on the hide, allowing more hide to come off. He was walking through the plant, observing, watching, to see if anything looked out of place or not. He toured through the entire kill floor, from where they take the hide off to the ones taking the guts out of the cow, then to where the carcasses went into the cold side. He was watching as one person made a cut from the groin to the sternum, then another person took the skinny double hooks to hook one side of the cow to another cow, and so on, to open up the abdomen and reveal the innards that were bulging out and ready to fall out. There was 2 or 3 workers that would that would take turns cutting behind the guts with their knives along the membrane, and then with one hand holding the heavy guts and the other hand holding the knife, and the worker would drop the guts into a tray which was on a conveyor that would take the guts to another area in the hot side, where it is an entire section totally devoted to separating the guts and then using absolutely every part of the animal. If there is anything that does not get used, it gets thrown into the rendering department, where the parts then get cooked and rendered into either animal feed or soap. If you were to look to your right, sort of at an angle, you could see where the cow's head was cut off, and then it would go along a conveyor, where the workers that just worked on the head, taking the meat off, the eyeballs, the brain, the tongue, etc. After the guts were taken out, the hooks were removed and hung on something that looked like a clothes hanger, and someone would take the used hooks and return them to and the cycle would just repeat itself over and over. He followed the carcasses all the way to the end of the kill floor, where they would go into a huge refrigerated room which had several rails and switches on the intricate rail system. As the carcasses would slap against each other, and a few other employees would make sure that the carcasses went where they were supposed to go. They would push several carcasses at once and let them slide down the rail, and then they would slap against the other carcasses that were already there. The carcasses would remain in this large area for 24 hours, and they would go to the cut floor, or the cold side, which is on the lower level of the plant. So far, he didn't see anything out of place yet. The carcasses were getting cut up like the regular routine, which it is done every day. Now he is in the cold side. Here, the employees wear white frocks and sweaters underneath. Once the carcass is pushed into the cut floor, there is a person with a huge circular saw that is held up with a cable. The workers use this saw to split the carcass in two. Further down, there is someone with a much smaller saw to cut at an angle along the ribs, and then the carcass begins to get quartered. And then that is where the quartered beef either goes directly to the grocery store or goes to the meat wagon. And now Daniel had just expanded his business, because there are now other grocery stores that are asking Daniel directly if he could supply their meat for their stores too. So far, Old Smoky hadn't found any problems yet. So he is now outside the plant, and he saw that the lawn needs to be mowed. So he started to walk to the shed to get out the riding lawnmower. On the way to the shed, he saw a group of new recruits. They were being toured by Boris Vanderbilt, or Old Smoky, or Eric Turner. Had to stand there and watch, as this always amused him. He was looking at one of the new recruits in particular. He just stood there staring at him. "What are you looking at, you old fuck?" Eric smiled. He grinned from ear to ear. Then he said, "I'm looking at your soul, son." Wait. Oh, I'm sorry. I lost my place for a second. Eric smiled. He grinned from ear to ear. Then he said, "I'm looking at your soul, son. It won't be long." "Won't be long for what?" This time the young teenager with the leather jacket and the brand new cowboy boots had a what the fuck look on his face. And then he said, "You're a crazy old man. You have no idea." Then his eyes suddenly became black like coal when he said that, and Old Smoky let out a little chuckle. Brian Patterson, Now, instead of the what the fuck look, now it was a more scared and concerned look, as Old Smoky then said, "I'll see you around soon." "What did he mean by that?" Brian asked out loud. Boris told the young man, "He's Old Smoky. He has been with Daniel since long before this plant was even built." "Well, what is this old man's problem? He was just standing there staring at me." "My best suggestion for you is to respect that old fuck, as you like to call him. He has earned the respect of all the workers here, especially Daniel." "Yeah, whatever." "Yeah, you'll think whatever." Old Smoky turned his attention back to the riding lawnmower and sat down on it and started it up. Now he is mowing the lawn as he is singing to himself, "Brian Patterson, don't you cry. With the whisk of the wind you will fly." Chimes rang from his lips as he blew into the air. Then chimes sounded off as he straightened himself up and started to mow the lawn, singing to himself, "On top of Old Smoky, all covered with grass, there's way too much blood here. Someone lost their ass. There's way too much blood here. Bodies cut up to sell for a phantom meat plant that feeds lost souls in hell." Boris took his new recruits to tour the plant. He took his new hires to start from the beginning of the the processing plant, in the stick pen where they kill the animal. Boris had the recruits stand to the side and watch from a distance as the cows were led into the corral. Someone with a bulletproof vest and a bolt gun would glide his bolt gun down the cow's back, and the cow would lift his head up. As soon as the cow lifted his head up, the worker would then shoot a 3-inch bolt into the cow's brain, right between the eyes. The cow would, of course, drop and then fall through a chute. There would be someone there on the bottom ready to catch the dead cow's leg with a chain. He would wrap the chain around the cow's ankle and hoist the cow up to the rails. Further down the line, someone would cut into the cow's tendon and slide a hook through it as the cow would hang on the trolley and then would start down the disassembly line. Suddenly, as Brian was looking over the rail into the corral at the cow that was being shot in the head, there was a slight breeze that Brian felt. And that is when the cow started to panic and buck inside the corral, banging against the sides, mooing loudly. The cow jumped over the corral, hanging half of its body over the rail, trying to get away, and it was almost over the side entirely. Brian stood there just a little away from the corral, but it was still entirely too close. The cow gored Brian with its horn in the sides. Brian had the cow's horn halfway into his side, hooked beneath his ribs, and he was being thrashed around by the panicked cow. Red liquid gushed from his side as the cow whipped him around like a rag doll as Brian was screaming in anguish, fear, and pain. They rushed to Brian's aid only to make it worse. The closer they got, the more insane the cow was getting, and the more Brian was being beat by the cow over and over and over and over again. Finally, the cow whipped his head up, and Brian was released from the horn of the cow, sending him flying into the air and then crashing down on the floor, white and pale and near death. Someone came up to the cow and popped it in the head with a bolt gun as the cow was drooped over the rail of the corral, dead. Finally, Brian was losing consciousness as he slipped away and then died. Boris said to himself, but loud enough for others to hear, "Oh shit." Boris told one of the other employees to get Daniel and tell him that we have a situation. Daniel was in the grocery store taking care of a customer who was complaining about the cost of milk. $2 a gallon is highway robbery, the old lady said at the register with her gallon of milk in her grocery cart. "What would be a fair price for you, madam?" "I wouldn't spend more than $1 for a gallon of milk." "Fine. Then you can have it for $1 then. Does that make you happy?" "Yes, sir. Thank you." "I do apologize for that, ma'am." "Quite okay." "Daniel, we have a situation," said the employee that just ran all the way down from the stick pin to the grocery store as he went through the meat department to get there. "Calm down. What's the situation?" "Come with me. There has been an accident in the plant." "Okay, I'm coming then. Thanks again, Mr. Henderson. Or should I say, Mayor Henderson?" "Quite welcome, ma'am. You have a pleasant day now." He followed the employee through the plant to where Brian is now laying dead near the stick pin. The area was barricaded so no one could get through, and Brian lay still on the floor in his own blood and staring into nothing. He went in through the barricaded area to get a closer look as Boris, who was close by, asked Daniel, "So, what do you want to do about the situation? Do you want to notify the next of kin?" Daniel was scratching his chin, thinking. Then finally he said, "No, this can't get out." "So what do you want to do then?" "Well, we have to get rid of the body. Nobody can know that this young man is dead, or at least that he died here." "So what do you want to do then?" "Take him down to the pork side, strip him of his clothes, take the money that is in his wallet if he has any, take all of his identification out of his wallet and destroy it. Let him get processed with the pork." "Okay, you got it then, boss." The rest of the new recruits were now standing off to the side, far enough away that nobody heard what was being said. Then Boris took the new recruits down to the training room and went over some paperwork. Then, after all the paperwork was done, he sent them home and told them to come back again tomorrow. And that is the end of Chapter 8, page 94. The next chapter will be Chapter 9, entitled The Wedding. And I can't wait to get to that chapter because I get to introduce two very special characters of mine, Bob and Larry. Yeah, they're kind of a comedy relief to this story, and also to other stories that I have, by the way. So, like I said, if you like what I am reading to you, click like and subscribe to my channel so that way you can get more notifications for new videos. And I have 3 other books out there on Amazon under HDThul. Please check them out. I think you'll like them. And thanks again for watching, and have a good day.